I'm going to briefly go over what this session is for. We're using a product called Adobe Sign. And Adobe Sign allows you to create electronic signatures on documents. So if you have a paper document that you need signed, and you would normally have to carry it to somebody's desk and say, can you please sign this? And then maybe after that, it might go to somebody else for signature. This session is going to teach you how to do that in Adobe Sign. There are two major ways to do this, and they're both in your workbook. Do not feel pressure that you have to remember everything. Your workbook, the training workbook, I'm going to be referring to that as we go along. And in that workbook, it'll pretty much cover everything that we go over. So we're going to use it. I'm going to reference it periodically through the training session. The first thing, I've opened up the workbook and what it looks like. The first thing is you'll notice that there will be links on the workbook. And when you hold down your control key on a PC, and it'll turn into a hand with a finger pointing, your index finger, then click on your mouse button, and that will take you to the section of the workbook. It's designed to work on your computer. Here's an example of some recipient routing. For example, it can be submitted by somebody, and they can go to a supervisor for signature. Then after the supervisor, go to a vice president. These symbols here indicate that it's requiring a signature. It's a logo that Adobe Sign uses. Okay? Now, there are two major types of electronic signatures that you can have. One is called a signature request. The other one is a workflow. There are benefits, pros, and cons for each. Now, what a workflow is it's a way for you to actually provide a link on a web page or provide a URL link to anybody in an email, for example, and say, fill out this form. When they click on the form, on the link, it will send them to a form that you've already created yourself, but you need to know who's going to be on that form in order to have this type of a workflow, because it does require you predetermined recipients. In most cases, those recipients may not change, but you can have them change. But the workflow itself, the number of participants doesn't change. It'll always be the same. A workflow is great, especially if you have a form that's out there that you want to have people fill out on a regular basis, that maybe you get a lot of forms like that. So you can see it does require a predetermined number of recipients. You can have multiple recipients, but the biggest benefit is a link on the web can be provided to that form. The first one we're going to do is we're going to work on a signature request. So what I'm going to do, stay on my screen. I'm going to log in. Before we go ahead and get started, I created a workflow preparation worksheet I'm going to go over to get you thinking about how this works. The form submitter, these are different roles that are played when you have a form. You obviously have the person that submits it. You have somebody who can be a signer, which means you require their signature or you would like to get their signature on the form. You also have an approver. An approver is someone who looks at it and says, it looks good to me, but they do not need to sign. And a form filler is somebody, let's say you have an area on your form that you just want them to fill in. Like you may have the third person, when they get it, they may fill in a section of the form for you. And finally, a CC just needs a copy, kind of like your email copy. I'm going to go over one of my examples. I put this table together to help you when you're designing workflows. With e-signatures, not so important, but with workflows, it's a good idea to have an idea beforehand, have it all prepared in a table here, so that way when you go to actually create it, it'll go more smoothly for you. This is all from the workbook, so don't worry if you don't have to memorize this, just examples. So here's an example of how I filled out the table. This is an example of a student assistant timesheet. So it was submitted by the student, and you can see their role was submitted by. And by the way, these roles, they can be titled whatever you want. In this case, I titled it a student. And you'll see where this comes into play. You can call them whatever you want. You just need to make sure that it makes sense to you. So in this case, we have a student. It's submitted to a set email, Samantha Smith, and their title is a supervisor, and we require their signature. And then James Cameron is the vice president, and he signs. And then we have an ASC, Mary Lee, who is getting a copy of it. Now, this last example here is exactly the same, only the difference is we left the supervisor blank because we want them to fill in their supervisor. Because you may have a form in a department that has multiple supervisors. So you tell the students, whoever your supervisor is, when you fill out the form, put their email in. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to sign in that the workbook actually has this in it. So if I go down and select e-signature request, and it says log into Adobe Sign, I'm going to click on that. Here is the link. Go ahead and put that in a browser window. Okay, so the first thing it's going to ask you for is your email address. This is going to be your email address on campus. Okay, then I'm going to click continue. Then it's going to ask me my personal or company account. You always want to use company account. You do not need to set up a personal account. A company account has already been created for you. So make sure you click on company account all the time when you're using Adobe Sign with Cal State 70. At that point in time, it's going to say, well, you need to sign into the enterprise system on campus. So it's going to take me to our campus login page. And I'm going to select workflow here. Okay, so it says fill out your workflow preparation sheet. Saw that. And then you log in. You guys are already logged in. So now we have to go ahead and create a usable template for the workflow. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And basically what you want to do, I'll go back to my screen here, is you want to go back to your home screen on your main account. So click on home if you're not already there. What we're going to do now is we're going to create a reusable template. You'll see a menu item down at the bottom that says create a reusable template. That's what you want to click on. The first thing we need to do is we need to name our template. The template name is, you can consider this like a file that's going to have some signature placements on it, and it's going to be used with a workflow. So I'm going to help you by providing a, I'm going to put 2 in there because I think I already have 1 from another class session. So, but what you can do is put in the name, the word test, followed by a hyphen, and then your name, your first name and last name. Now, what we recommend when you do this is that you would put your department, your division, and then maybe your department. And that way, because your forms in the future, if you create them, are going to be listed with everybody else's, you'll be able to find them more easily. For example, library, hyphen, and then, so now you're only looking at library forms instead of all the forms on campus. And over here under template type, make sure you click on both and any user in my organization. Now we need to add the file that's going to be used in this workflow. I want you to add exactly the same file that we did before. So click on Add Files, same method. Go up, click on Example Signature Request, and click Open. Double click on it. The way you get here is you click on Home, and then down below on the in the center, there's a Create a Reusable Template. Okay. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to do that again really quickly for review. Test. I'm going to put my name. I'm going to add the file. Okay. Before we continue, make sure over here that you have selected both and you've selected any user in my organization, and you see the example signature request in the files box, and you've named it properly, test and then your name, test hyphen and your name. It's important that we have all those in the right place in order for this to work right. So now you want to click on Preview and Add Fields. This is going to be familiar to you now because this is the second time around we've looked at this. It looks very similar to when you created an e-signature request. In fact, with the difference of the fact that you don't see names, you see participants instead of names, it's going to be very similar. So first select participant 1 at the top, which in my case is an olive color. And under signature fields, I want you to drag the signature. And also under signer fields, you want to drag their name and the date, just as we did in the first example. And then I'd like you to do that with the participant 2. Select participant 2 and then go to signature fields and so on and so forth. Okay, and then add, go under signer fields, add the name and the date. There's nothing better than learning through repetition. And it really is like that because you're creating the template the same way, only this is going to be used in the workflow. Now, I've added a little caveat for you. We're going to add a third participant. So if we go over here to template recipients, if you click on the arrow, we want to select add new participant. You'll see it on the menu there because you'll see there's only 2 participants and then anyone. We need a third participant. When you click on that, it should add a participant 3. Okay, now with participant 3, we're going to make them a form filler. So what we're going to do is they're going to fill out these 2 lines here on the form. So I'm going to select a different submenu called Data Fields. In Data Fields, you'll find a text input. You want to grab text input and place it on here. Now, you'll notice I selected participant 2. I should have selected participant 3, so I'm going to delete that. Make sure I select the right participant. Okay, and I can tell by what? By the colors. So I'm going to drag text input. You can change the size of the boxes and move them around by if you want to change it horizontally, you go on the right side of the box and you'll see a horizontal arrow. Just hold down your mouse button and then you can drag it. If you go to the lower side of the box, you'll see a vertical arrow, and once again you can do that. And if it's 4 arrows, you can move the whole box. That can be done with any of your boxes. Even after you place them, you can move them around if you don't like their placement. So go ahead and drag 2 text boxes over and adjust them to the size that you want. You'll notice that Adobe Sign likes lines because it uses them to recognize, okay, I think this is where you want a box. And that is helpful. But sometimes you want to adjust their size, and that's how you do that. We're about done with the template. So I am going to, now that we've had this, we're basically at a point where we have a template. We want 3 participants on that template, and we've selected their signature and name and date fields the same way. The only difference is we've now added a 3rd participant, and they're going to be filling in the section of the form. So now what you want to do is go ahead and save your template. If you're not sure you named it correctly, you can go up here under template properties and see, it'll see the name, and you can change it there if it's not set correctly. But I'm sure you guys made sure your template was saved correctly at the previous page. But if you needed to, you can rename it there. Now, let's go ahead and click on Save in the lower right-hand corner. Now you have a template. What we need to do now is we need to build the engine that gets it moving. Right now, it's just a piece of electronic paper, but it's not moving. We need to create that engine, the mechanics of making it work. And that's what we call a workflow. So here's where we're going to learn how to do a workflow. Go ahead and click on Account or Group. Actually, it's going to look like Group in on your screen. So where it says Group, you want to click on that, and you want to go down on the left to where it says Workflows.
Shaun, I had a quick clarification, and I may need Jose to respond. So right now in the training session, they see Group, but on their own, they will see Account. Is that correct, Jose?
No, they'll always be Group.
Thank you.
Thank you. So under Workflows, you're going to see a list of workflows if they've been created in your group so far, but they haven't, it might be empty. So what we want to do is we want to add your workflow. So over here on the right, you're going to see a plus symbol. Click on that, and you'll get to the workflow screen. Alrighty, we're ready to go. We're going to fill out a few things here. I'll give you an overview. Over here on the left-hand side, these are menu items in the workflow that we're going to be going through, okay, in order from top to bottom. On each particular menu item, we're going to be filling out things, and I'm going to go through those sections with you, okay? So when we get to the bottom here, the workflow will be completed. So the first menu item is workflow info. That's the workflow name that it's asking for here. What that is that when you have that web link and you click on it, it's going to come up with a name. It's going to say, here is the name of this particular workflow. I'm going to continue with my theme with sales contract. So in other words, and you want to put your department, in my case it's ITS, so you would want to put your department, right? But for purposes of this demonstration, so you can find your workflow, let's call our department test, okay? And then put your name for your workflow. We're actually done with that section. You can provide instructions to the sender if you wanted to. So this is where you would tell people how to fill out your form. And then oftentimes, you don't have to do anything. You can leave that blank, but it all depends how complex your workflow is. Now let's click on agreement info on the left, the next menu item. Here you have the agreement name. Remember what that was? This is where when they get a link in their email, it says, John Smith is requesting your signature on, and that's where you put the agreement name. So this is actually where you can put whatever you want. I'm going to say sales contract. The other things we have here is if you want to send a carbon copy automatically to somebody, you can put emails in here, multiple emails, separated by commas. Okay, if you want to send a carbon copy to somebody. I'm going to just put in a DSelva, for example, and I'm going to make it editable. I'm going to make sure I check the box editable here. That means that when the user submits it, they're going to be able to edit that CC row. So if you do put somebody in there, make sure they're editable. We're done with that. Next thing we're going to go to is recipients. Before I continue, the only things I went over were agreement name and the CC box. Make sure it is editable, checked at the bottom, and then click on, then when you're done with that, go to the next row, and that is recipients. This is the funnest part. I like this part because here's where you get into the how do I say, the meat and potatoes, if you will, of what makes your form work. You're going to tell Adobe Sign what order people are going to, who they're going to be. You've got 3 participants, remember? We've got 3, so now we've got to define each one of those. So the first one, if you go to the oval and you click on the arrow to edit, I'm going to title this person submitted by. So I'm going to right click on the pencil up here. And I'm going to type in submitted by. You'll notice when you do that, that immediately over on the left, the oval, the title says submitted by. Now, we also want to mark this recipient as a sender. So in that box, you want to check this recipient is the sender. And finally, the editable box, you want to uncheck that one because when this person fills it out, I don't want them to be able to fill it out for anybody else. It's going to be, they're going to be forced to fill it out and sign it. And I'll explain more on how that works later when you see the demonstration. We also want to make sure that the checkbox is marked on required. And of course, just leave this as a default. Identification authentication should be none. So make sure your setup looks like that. Now we're going to add our second participant. When I click on that little plus sign, it comes up with a few choices. I want to select signer because I also want them to sign it. And you'll get another similar box. I want you to go ahead and title it second signer. And once again, these can be anything you want. It's just so it makes sense to you in your workflow. Okay? Now, you do not want to mark this as a sender, and you do want it editable. And of course, if you want it required, I'm going to go ahead and put in Doris's email. Let's say Jose's email. Okay. You'll see how this works. Make sure that it's editable here. That's checked and it's required. Okay, finally, we're going to do the last one.
Shaun, can you remind me why I want it to be editable?
Okay, yes. The reason why you want this one to be editable is when and that's a very good question, thank you. The reason why you want it to be editable is because when the form is going to be filled out, it'll allow the person submitting it to change it if they want to. So in other words, if it's somebody's supervisor that's signing, you want them to be able to put whatever supervisor you want in there. Now, I put in Jose Lopez because it'll fill it in with Jose as a default. But if they want to, they can change it. That's what editable means. If you don't want them to change it, if you know that your form, your second signer is always going to be a particular person, then you would put their email up here. For example, if President Morales has to sign this and he's always a second signer, you would put Morales's email there and you would uncheck editable. And what that means is that it will always go to him for signature. And there's no way to change that.
Thank you.
Good, good, thank you. If you have any other questions, please shoot them out. Okay, so we want to make sure that is checked for editable so it is changeable, and make sure you do not have this recipient as a sender on the second one checked. That's only for the first one submitted by. I'm going to click OK. And then we're going to go to the third one. This is our last participant. Now I'm going to make them a form filler. You'll notice how the logo changes when you select form filler to indicate that this recipient or participant is a form filler. Now let's just go in and we can title them form filler. It's kind of redundant, but at least you're getting used to doing the titles. They could be final filler or whatever you want to call them again. It's up to you. Now I'm going to put in Doris's email in here. Just accept the default here. We want to make sure it's editable and it's required. Okay. We're almost done here. I'm going to continue. If hopefully, once again, you want your screen once again to look like this. Make sure editable and required is checked. We're going to go to the next step, and that's emails. On the left, the only thing you need to do on this screen at this point is uncheck agreement starts under sender. That's it. Leave everything else the same. And we're ready to go to the next step, and that's the documents. Now this is where you tell Adobe Sign the document that's going to be used in your workflow. And remember, you created your document, so you want to click on plus here and then look it up, and it should start with test and then have your name. And once you select the circle there, then click OK, and it should add the document. You should see the name of it listed. Finally, the last thing you need to do here in terms of setting up the workflow is click the required checkbox. I'm going to have you save your workflow because you're done at this point. Make sure you have check required over here and that your document appears here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and go to the top and click Save. You might have to scroll up to see this menu. I know they did it. It's kind of, if you scroll down, you may not see it. Scroll up to the top and click Save when you save your workflow. There we go. And right after you save your workflow, click Activate, which is going to be right on the right-hand side. You'll see Activate in a blue oval. You want to click on that, and it'll come up and verify. And at that point, you can activate your workflow. Yes, you want to save it first and then activate it. We're going to go ahead and test our workflow. What we want to do now, go ahead and click Close here. If you're at an odd screen or whatever, you can hit the back arrow. But what we want to do is we want to get to the home screen again. So when you get this menu here, you want to click on Home. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually, each one of you is going to test your workflow. You're going to fill it in, and you're going to send it. So you're going to see exactly what happens when you start your own workflow. So you want to click on Start from Library. And over here on the left, you want to make sure you click on Workflows. It's essential that you click on Workflows. It can be confusing. Make sure, because what you want is your workflow. Now, if you type in your name under the search window, if you type in the name test, it should come up, and you can use that to filter to find your workflow. In my case, it's test Shaun Geer 2. So I'm going to go ahead, and once you see it there, click Start to start it. So go ahead and click Start, and then what you're going to see is that your workflow is going to come up, and you'll see now the 3 participants that, depending on how you filled yours out, myself, which I cannot change. Remember, this was uneditable, so it means it's going to require me to sign it. Now, if they were not signed in, it'll have them go through, enter their email, and log in to the campus system. But because I'm already signed in, it just goes right to the form. This is what I mean by editable. Let's say, you know what? I don't want the second signer to be Jose. I want it to be Doris. I'm going to put Angelica's name in here. She's going to be the form filler. That's why we have a editable box. If you wanted her to be the form filler every time, just uncheck that box in your workflow. And by the way, it's changeable. I can change that anytime. I just go back and edit my workflow, and I decide, you know what? That's no longer editable. So you can go back and change it. On the CC, as I said, you can put multiple people in. I'm going to go ahead, because I know Doris gets enough email as it is. I'm going to take it out of the CC. But if you wanted somebody to be able to fill in CCs, they would do that. So now at this point, your document should appear here because it's required. You want to just click Send. And what it's going to do is it'll open up the document, and it's going to show you the document on your screen to sign. Okay, because remember, I wanted the first person to be the signer. It forces it to be me. I click Sign. Now it goes on to Doris. So Doris is the second signer. So notice how it says sales contract. That's good. So now you're going to notice she's participant 2. And then click to sign.
Yes, you are. It's Angelica.
Okay, Angelica, if you could share your screen, and you're the form filler. See, it says review and fill out. So hers is a little bit different because she's a form filler. And then you click on that, and it should bring up a browser window. Yeah, there you go. And because she's already signed in, it goes right to the form. She clicks on Start. There you go. Just type whatever you want in there. There's 2 lines. Okay, and then click Submit. You can go ahead and click on Manage there. And we'll use your screen as a demo since we're here. Now, on Manage, if you click on Completed on the left, you'll see that top one. That's the one you just did. Just click on it and click Open. And now you see, since she was the form filler, she also has access to the form the same way I do. I requested it. And as soon as it loads, you see how you filled it in there, and you see Doris's signature, and you see mine. Now over on the right hand, Angelica, if you go in the right hand side, go down to the bottom, and you'll see Activity. If you click on that, you can see, go down to the bottom of that list, you can see everybody when it was created, going from the bottom to the top, the chronological order, all the way up to where you filled it out, the date and the time. Okay? Now I want you to think you can use whatever form to do this. Adobe Sign uses what we call an electronic signature. The electronic signature is a way of signing a document based on somebody's email identification. It is not the same as a digital signature. A digital signature is a verified signature. In most cases on campus, though, an electronic signature will be good enough to sign forms. As I've always said, I bought a house with it, so electronic signatures will work in most cases. Everybody on campus has an Adobe account. So if you set up something for on-campus users, it will work. Off-campus works as well, but there is no guarantee that that person is who they say they are. Here on campus, we identify them by their email address.